Hello guys, Jonathan here again. And if you've been playing What Is This Weapon on social media, you will immediately have said AR-15 for this one. At least I hope you did, rather than M16. just to reiterate for the umpteenth time, AR-15 is the entire family of weapons. M16 is just the US service rifle variant of the AR-15. AR-15 doesn't mean semi-automatic, as people often think. Of course, this being this series, we have chosen another weird and wacky one for you. And you possibly spotted why this one is different. Let's talk about that right away. It's the heavy barrel, and the real giveaway here, the bipod. So it's a unique design, early design of bipod. It is a heavy barrel, probably even slightly heavier even than the later M16A2 profile barrel, where Colt put a heavy barrel on, or partially heavy barrel, on all of the rifles. This is a bit different though. This is a heavy barrel automatic rifle. You could even call it a light machine gun, a squad automatic weapon. That's the idea. Now you might have seen that in the M16A1 era, Colt was marketing a heavy barrel bipod equipped heavy assault rifle, automatic rifle, whatever you want to call it. Well, that wasn't in fact the first one. The first one was not even a rifle. It was a conversion kit. So more on how this became a heavy barreled rifle in just a moment. Let's look at the sort of technical differences. So we've already got this on its bipod, as you can see. However, this is pretty adjustable. We have push button catches, obviously one on both leg, push in and pull. And you can see there, if I extend that all the way to maximum, in fact you can see the two settings, the two min-max settings if you like, with the notches on the internal leg, machine steel square section leg with detents. It's a very robust design, I think. So it's a spring catch that sits within those notches, or one of those notches obviously, not all at the same time, whichever one you select, and then when the button is undepressed, there's not a cutout in the out of the way, and therefore there's steel on steel and it doesn't move. Not the best explanation ever, but hopefully you grasp that one. I'll just pull that out to its maximum as well, so you can see that's a pretty tall bipod. No worries there over the magazine on the bottom of the weapon getting in the way, certainly not with this 20 rounder or even with a 30 rounder, even with a drum mag or some later design of AR magazine, you're going to be fine. Now, you might not be fine at the back because obviously your shoulder has to be at the right height to operate this thing, and that's pretty high. So I'll leave the saw gunners and machine gunners in the comments to debate the merits of such a wide adjustment range on the bipod. We'll drop it down to something a bit more manageable, like the minimum again. And in terms of folding, you can get a hint of how this works from this angled plate, or this curved plate here, which has similar semicircular detents on it. Two of them, one for the open position that it's in now, and if I press this other spring catch and fold, you'll hear it click into that second position, which is stowed. And if we do that to both of them, obviously that gives us our heavy assault rifle configuration, as it were. So we can fire this thing quite comfortably from the shoulder. The extra weight up front will actually potentially make it more accurate. It's a bit more cumbersome, to say the least, than a conventional A1 or pre-A1 AR-15. But the idea of this is to be able to deliver somewhat precise, long range, support fire, short bursts, that kind of thing. Limited, of course, by a 20-round magazine. They didn't yet have the 30-rounders available when this gun was configured. So to return to that story, the weapon in the configuration you see it dates from 1965. That's when this heavy barrel with bipod was fitted. It's not entirely clear when these round handguards were fitted. They could have come with these kits, or this could be a later replacement. However, these are not A2 pattern round handguards. This round section with a top and a bottom, the idea being that they're interchangeable. You can put the top on the bottom and the bottom on the top. They aren't specific compared to the old triangular handguards where you had a left and a right. So that's the simplified logistics to come up with one piece that you make and it fits whichever way up. Doesn't matter. No, these are not from the A2 era. These are from 1967 I'd say at the latest. There is a Colt promotional material from 1967 showing these round handguards. So this design, which is still around today on, well, M4s and M16s that haven't been upgraded with rail systems, so not many these days, but I'm sure you recognise it and you immediately think A2 era, but no. Every chance they came with this kit. Why do I keep talking about conversion kits? Well, at the time, Colt had developed the heavy barrel with the bipod. Now, there's an interesting connection here with the Cadillac Gauge company, who made firearms. Notably, the Stoner 63 was produced by Cadillac Gauge from 1963, funnily enough. So at the same time, they're making heavy barrels for Colt to create a heavy-barreled AR-15 variant. But at the time, certainly for the Brits, who already had 7 examples in country, this is 1963, only 7 AR-15s in the country for test and evaluation, this being one of them. So that's back in 63. 2 years later, 2 of those rifles are rebarreled with this kit. So that's how you end up in this configuration. And that's why this thing has early features. So, well, the flash hider on this is the second pattern, so-called duckbill. That will have come with this kit. That was standard at that time. In 63, it's possible that this was provided with the first pattern of duckbill. Not too relevant. But it certainly had a standard pencil barrel, no bipod, and triangular handguards with green furniture. The order for the first 100 rifles in 1964 specifies that, or the discussion around it specifies that the furniture would be black. Now, obviously, these things are quite modular. Parts are easily replaceable. I am pretty sure that this green pistol grip here is original to 1963. Likewise, the triangular charging handle here, which was roundly condemned by the Brits and the Americans as being far too slippery and not very good, and replaced on just about everything, but this one has managed to keep that. I think that's going to be original to the gun as well. Minor early features like the bolt hold open, not having this angled lower portion here that was revised later on. A pierced fire selector, that's an early feature that changed later as well. And one of the major giveaways here is this roll mark on the side that tells us that this is a Colt armour light. So it's modern enough that the Colt name is also appearing on the gun as well as Armalite, who are the licensors of the IP, as it were. Model 01, and we have our very early serial number. Not our earliest AR, by the way, but early serial number of 013705, or 05, I should say. That also means that it has the early pattern lower without any kind of protection around the magazine catch, and without the bump here for the detent for the front pivot pin to stop it falling out, because those front pins were getting lost all over the place. That's why you get that initial, what they call partial fence lower that precedes the M16A1 with the protection around the magazine catch. This is all AR nerd stuff. But hopefully of interest nonetheless. So all of that means that this thing has been through a number of different trials. So as mentioned, one of 7 guns submitted for initial test and evaluation. The only one that was listed as retained unfired for some reason. So they were keeping this one in reserve while they shot the other ones to heck to see how they would perform. Now, so we have the initial visual inspection of this thing to see if it was, quality control was up to scratch. It wasn't always in the early days of the AR-15. So it notes bore clean, muzzle end bent. So the barrel that came off this later on to be replaced with the heavy barrel was actually slightly bent. Now, from memory, another report that I read, they simply straightened the bent barrels. Also, with an examination using an introscope, tool marks were observed in the bore, hole in grooves 15.5 inches from breech end. Bearing in mind that's on the barrel that's no longer on this gun and was probably scrapped. in 1965. Metal broken away from edge of gas hull. So that's the port in the gas block. The port in the barrel takes it into the gas block, takes it down the tube to drive the working parts. So there were bits of metal around that hull. So in other words, not properly finished from the factory. So that was noted. And similar issues were found with all 7 of these early rifles that would have been rushed out the door by Colt, hoping that the British military were going to buy a load of them. And in the end, only just shy of 7,000 AR-15s were purchased of the original AR-15 pattern. We then, in October 1963, we then find adverse conditions tests. This rifle features in those. We even have the name of the trials officer, an A.A. Watts. 3 rifles that were tested passed the sand test, but failed the mud test, interestingly. This is the Armalite AR-15, AR-10, very sound design, but it too can be defeated in the right circumstances. And there are lots of details, such as the infamous chrome chamber, chrome bore thing with the M16. You can easily cripple a good design with poor quality control, poor specification, and also rough usage and not necessarily looking after it properly. So some issues there were discovered. There was mention there of the cocking handle being a problem in mud because you would slip off it because it's so steeply shaped, and so it's how we end up with the classic T-shaped AR cocking handle, charging handle if you prefer. There was one failure in a water in the bore test. Now that's something that happens with small caliber weapons where the water cannot drain efficiently from the bore, and so it's not drained by the time you pull the trigger, and so there's effectively a barrel obstruction, and you can have a breech explosion as a result. So perhaps not unsurprising. A lot of this stuff we see as a result of American trials as well. But wherever the water was drained from the barrel, these things passed the test. It's not rocket science. It was also noted in October '63 that the bore and chamber finish was poor. So again, quality control issues being picked up even after the initial receipt of these things. We then have a second trial, 22nd of April 1964, so a little bit later on, and this thing is being fired in that. Still in that ordinary rifle configuration. Now the handguards, which would have been the conventional, quite weak triangular handguards made of a fibre impregnated, relatively early plastic, they broke on either this or the other rifle that was being tested at the time, and that was the main basis on which the AR-15 was initially, briefly rejected as a service rifle for the British Army. But not that much later on, 1964, they do in fact adopt the AR-15 as a special to theatre requirement, and this is for Malaya and Borneo. And this is where our total of nearly 7,000 rifles comes in. So in April '65, so we're several years in at this point, and this thing has now been rebarreled with this heavy barrel for another set of trials. And this is where the question arises really of why was the British Army interested in a beefed up AR-15 or M16 if you prefer. It's not clear. It's frustratingly not clear from records and trials and things like this. When you look at archival material, it's not always clear what the backstory was. You're just looking at the end point of a document. You're not seeing the backstory. If you're lucky, there'll be more documents that will give you a bigger picture. Here, not really clear what the operational requirement was thought to be, but given that it's pretty straightforward, a heavy barrel and a bipod tells you some sort of squad automatic weapon, I think. So logically enough, you're equipping potentially a whole squad with AR-15 rifles. One guy could have ended up with one of these machine guns to help support and have interchangeability with his squad mates. That's the logic that underpinned the Soviet RPK, and indeed the later British L86 light support weapon as well. Little difference in success between those two, but nonetheless, that would be the logic. And indeed the report or memo in mid-65 says that these weapons, these experimental heavy barrel weapons, are urgently required in the Far East theatre. Again, not clear why they're urgently required, except that I think they wanted to quickly evaluate what the possibilities were to augment the British squad firepower, section firepower. So the final tests that were done, or at least that we have records of before this thing was put into the pattern room, which is how we got it, was a test of accuracy. Now that didn't just mean semi-automatic accuracy, it also meant accuracy firing bursts from automatic fire capable heavy barreled rifles, but also a carbine. They had some sort of carbine. I'm guessing it was a Colt Model 605, which is the type of carbine where they just shorten the barrel in front of the gas block, if that makes sense. So the flash hider sits here. I think that's the carbine they must be talking about. We do have a 605 in the collection, but it's not the rifle. I believe it's not the rifle that's tested. So there they're looking at, as I say, fully automatic fire from this thing, but burst fire from the carbine. Another reason it's very likely a 605, because that was typically equipped with a 3-round burst mechanism. Why am I going on about that? Well, that's relevant to later on, because the burst mechanisms keep coming in and out of fashion. Armies keep thinking that they can conserve ammunition, circumvent training by limiting their automatic weapons to burst, either 2 or usually 3-round bursts. Most recently, the AK-12, the Kalashnikov AK-12, was introduced with an optional 2-round burst between semi and automatic. And the most recent news on that is that seems to have caused problems in the field, such that Kalashnikov have redesigned the gun to get rid of the burst fire. And that's foreshadowed by about half a century by this. As regards accuracy, the burst control mechanisms do not appear to offer any advantages. In fact, groups obtained in these limited firings were larger than those shot by manual control. In other words, manual control of automatic fire. They also noted that pinning the trigger back to get the full 3-round burst, bearing in mind that this system would need to be reset. So if you let go of the trigger too early, you'd only get 1, not 3. So a workaround was to pull the trigger all the way and hold it for full 3-round bursts. Even that was a problem, because that tended to adversely affect accuracy, because you were effectively snatching at the trigger. All the stuff that ends up being talked about whenever people debate burst mechanisms in guns. So yeah, interesting that nonetheless the Americans did go with 3-round burst on the M16A2. See back to our previous British AR-15 video of an M16A2 variant that we had the other week for a bit more discussion on that. And that was questioned, and ultimately that feature has been removed from modern American service rifles. And then the Russians have had the same experience. So we keep reinventing the wheel, we keep going back to this burst mechanism, and it was proven in 1965 that was not a good idea. And that's the beginning of the story, really. Quite a long story that culminates with, for example, the new Ranger Regiment of the British Army, currently looking for an Armalite pattern rifle to equip itself with, in preference to the SA-80 as the standard service rifle. British or UKSF, Special Forces, or Special Operations Forces, still using variants of the AR-15, and indeed of the, ultimately of the AR-10 as well, so 7.62 ARs. So there's a strong and quite long British tradition of use of the Armalite, as we tended to call it, even if the main rifle was the FN FAL, the SLR, and then latterly the SA-80 or the L85. As always, guys, thank you very much for watching this video. You can catch us every week doing this. You can also head over to the GameSpot channel if you're into your video games, where the guns and the games merge together. You can also check out our various social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and the website as well. Now, the website's probably the best place to pick up on events and things that are going on at our physical sites. You don't have to come for an event. You can just come and have a good look around up here in Leeds, down at the Tower of London, or our museum down on the south coast of Artillery at Fort Nelson. Please do come and visit us. It's our favourite thing as a museum when people come and physically visit us, as much as we enjoy doing the digital stuff as well.